Every evening, a German shepherd walked through crowded streets with a worn canvas bag gently clenched in his jaws. Inside were two fragile lives and the truth someone tried to bury. He wasn't lost. He was waiting. When one police officer finally stopped, he uncovered not abandonment, but betrayal. And when hope was almost gone, only a miracle remained. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe God still works through quiet acts of kindness, subscribe. This story may restore your faith in miracles. A cold afternoon pressed down on the city, the sky low and colorless, traffic breathing exhaust and impatience as winter threatened rain but never quite delivered it. Rex moved along the sidewalk with deliberate care. He was a full-grown German shepherd, nearly 6 years old by the stiffness in his gait and the faint silver threading the black saddle of his coat. Once his fur had been thick and proud, the kind that caught light and admiration. Now it lay dulled with dust and city grime, clumped at the edges as if the streets themselves had tried to claim him. His amber eyes, however, remained unsettlingly clear. They did not wander. They did not plead. They scanned faces with quiet precision, as though Rex were counting time rather than people. Clenched gently in his jaws was a single object, an old canvas bag, faded green. It seams fraying, one strap knotted twice to keep it from slipping. He carried it not like a burden, but like a vow. Every few steps, his jaw tightened, not from aggression, but from memory. He had learned that letting go, even for a second, could cost everything. People parted around him. A woman in a beige coat recoiled, lifting her purse higher, her mouth tightening in reflexive disgust. A delivery driver muttered something under his breath and tugged his jacket closed. A teenage boy laughed nervously and filmed from a distance, more curious than kind. Rex did not react. He had learned long ago that eye contact invited misunderstanding. Hunger gnawed at him, a low ache that had become familiar, but it was not what drove him forward. Hunger could wait. Fear could not. Fear lived in the bag, and fear demanded vigilance. At the corner where the pedestrian light flickered red, Rex paused. His paws rested on cold concrete, pads cracked and tender beneath thick fur. The bag brushed against his chest as he lowered his head slightly, adjusting his grip. Inside, something shifted. Not enough for others to notice, but enough for him. His ears twitched, and his breathing slowed. He did not whine. He did not bark. Noise had consequences. Silence, he had learned, was safer. That was when Ethan Carter noticed him. Ethan was 41, tall and lean in the way men became after years of missed meals and longer nights. His dark navy police jacket hung open at the collar, revealing a creased uniform shirt beneath. A short beard framed a sharp jawline, the kind that might have looked severe if not softened by tired eyes. Those eyes had seen too much too early. A fatal car crash during his first year on patrol, a child he couldn't revive, a partner who left the force after a shooting neither of them spoke about. Those moments had sanded down Ethan's optimism into something quieter and harder attention. He no longer rushed past things that felt wrong. He slowed down. While other officers crossed the street, Ethan stayed where he was. He watched Rex stand patiently at the curb, bag still in his mouth, posture alert but not threatening. There was discipline in the dog's stillness, something trained and then broken by circumstance. Ethan felt it in his chest, that subtle pressure he had learned to trust. He stepped away from the noise of traffic and crouched, resting on one knee, keeping his hands visible, his movements slow. Rex turned his head just enough to see him. Their eyes met. In that instant, Ethan understood what unsettled him. This was not a stray hoping for food. This was not an abandoned animal searching for warmth. This was a guardian. The dog's gaze held expectation, not desperation. Rex took 2 cautious steps forward, boots and paws separated by less than an arm's length. He did not retreat. He did not bare his teeth. With a careful motion that seemed practiced, he lowered his head and set the bag down between them. Ethan's breath caught. The bag was heavier than it looked. He could tell by the way the fabric sagged when Rex released it. The dog immediately placed one paw on the strap, claws flexing lightly, a silent boundary. Ethan nodded, more to himself than to the dog. "Okay," he murmured, voice low, calm. "I'm not taking anything." Around them, the city kept moving. Shoes slapped pavement. A bus hissed to a stop. No one noticed the quiet standoff unfolding inches above the ground. Ethan studied Rex more closely, the scars half hidden beneath fur, the way his shoulders tensed whenever someone passed too near, the faint tremor in his hind leg he tried to control. This dog had learned to survive by reading the world accurately. Ethan recognized that skill. He had learned it the same way, by being wrong once and paying for it forever. Rex leaned forward, just slightly, and then nudged the bag toward Ethan with his nose. His ears flattened for a moment, then lifted again. It was not surrender, it was invitation. Inside the bag, something shifted again, followed by a sound so small it could have been mistaken for the city settling, a breath, a fragile whimper, barely there. Ethan froze. Rex's eyes never left his face. Ethan Carter hesitated only a second before reaching for the bag, aware that whatever waited inside would not allow him to remain unchanged. His hands, steady in emergencies, yet uncharacteristically tense now, loosened the knotted strap with careful fingers. The canvas opened slowly, as if resisting the moment it had been carried toward for days. Rex stepped closer, his broad chest rising and falling against Ethan's knee, one paw edging forward in a protective arc, not aggressive, but absolute. Inside the bag were 2 puppies, impossibly small against the gray fabric. Luna lay curled on her side, her fur a pale mix of tan and black, still soft with the faint sheen of infancy. She could not have been more than 3 weeks old. Her ribs fluttered beneath thin skin as she breathed, shallow but determined, had one paw twitching as if chasing something in sleep. Milo was pressed against her, darker in color, his tiny muzzle tucked beneath her neck. His eyes were barely open, cloudy with new sight, his body trembling in short, uneven shivers that spoke of cold, hunger, and exhaustion layered together. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He had pulled victims from wreckage before, adults who could scream and curse and fight. These 2 had no such defenses. They simply endured. But it was not only the puppies that stopped his breath. Tucked beside them, wrapped in a stained cloth, lay a scatter of objects that should never have been near living things. Crushed tablets in blister packs, an uncapped syringe yellowed with age, small vials without labels, their plastic cloudy and scratched. The smell hit him next, sharp and chemical, cutting through the city air with a bitterness that made his eyes sting. Ethan recognized it, not a single substance, but the familiar cocktail of neglect and intent. Someone had gathered these not by accident. Someone had planned. Rex lowered his head, nose hovering just above Luna and Milo, checking them in the way only a parent does, memorizing each breath. His ears were flattened now, his jaw tight. The muscles along his shoulders coiled with restrained fear. Ethan understood then that Rex had not carried the bag for convenience. He had carried it as evidence. The dog's body angled subtly, shielding the puppies from the open air, from Ethan himself, until he had decided the man could be trusted. Trust, Ethan realized, was not given lightly by those who had survived betrayal. "Hey," Ethan whispered, voice rougher than he intended. "I see them." He did not reach for the puppies yet. He knew better. He had learned, after years on the force, that rushing comfort often created more damage than distance. Instead, he scanned the sidewalk, gauging risk, and a few people had slowed, curiosity tugging them closer, but no one intervened. To the city, this was just another strange moment, another story they would half notice and forget. Ethan removed his jacket carefully and draped it around the open bag, creating a barrier against the cold without touching the puppies directly. Rex watched every movement, amber eyes sharp, but he did not growl. That alone felt like permission. Ethan exhaled slowly. His thoughts moved fast now, assembling fragments into a pattern he didn't like. These drugs were not veterinary supplies. They were wrong in dosage, wrong in purpose. Someone had tried to silence something small and inconvenient. A woman stopped a few steps away, hesitating. Her name was Sarah Lynn, mid-30s, slight and narrow-shouldered, her dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail, already unraveling from a long day. Her skin was pale, as almost translucent in the winter light, and her eyes held a softness that suggested she noticed things others avoided. She crouched instinctively, hands hovering uselessly in front of her. "Are they alive?" she asked, voice barely above a breath. "Yes," Ethan replied, firm, grounding both of them. "But they need help." Sarah nodded quickly, swallowing hard. She didn't ask questions. She pulled out her phone and stepped back, already dialing, her movements efficient despite the shock written across her face. Rex glanced at her once, then back to Ethan, deciding she was not the threat that mattered. Ethan reached back into the bag and lifted the cloth-wrapped bundle of drugs, holding it away from the puppies. The weight of it felt heavier than it should have, as if the intent behind it added mass. He imagined hands that had filled this bag before Rex ever touched it, hands that had measured, prepared, decided. His jaw tightened, and he thought of the moments in his own life when cruelty had arrived quietly, disguised as necessity, and how long it had taken him to recognize it for what it was. Rex pressed his forehead briefly against Ethan's thigh. A fleeting contact, then straightened. It was not gratitude. It was confirmation. The bag was open now. The secret was no longer his alone. A thin sound rose from Luna's chest, a fragile whimper that cut through the noise of traffic like a blade. Rex responded instantly, lowering himself so that his body curved around the puppies, shielding them from view. Ethan closed the bag halfway, leaving enough space for air and warmth, and rose to his feet, careful not to startle Rex. "We're going to fix this," he said, more promise than plan. Rex did not look convinced. He stood his ground, eyes locked on Ethan, waiting for proof. The station lights hummed softly as Ethan Carter laid the contents of the bag across a stainless steel table, each item spaced with deliberate care. The puppies had been taken to a nearby veterinary clinic under emergency care, leaving behind a silence that pressed heavier than noise. Rex waited just outside the interview room, lying down but not resting. His head lifted, ears angled toward every sound. He did not pace. He conserved energy, the way animals did when survival demanded patience. Ethan worked methodically. He photographed the unmarked vials, logged the syringe, noted the partial serial numbers barely visible beneath scratches. One detail bothered him. The mix was inconsistent. Not something a veterinarian would prepare. Not something random, either. It suggested improvisation, someone using whatever they had, with no regard for dosage or pain. That recklessness narrowed the field. People who hurt animals often did so in haste, convinced of their own necessity. The name came from a housing complaint filed months earlier in an industrial fringe of the city. Caleb Moore, 39, tall, broad-shouldered, with a long, narrow face and a beard he never quite trimmed evenly. Photos showed a man who avoided eye contact with the camera, his mouth set in a permanent line of irritation. Former warehouse supervisor, fired after repeated altercations. Neighbors described him as volatile but quiet, the kind who slammed doors rather than argued. One report mentioned a dog chained behind his unit, big, aggressive-looking, someone had written, afraid but curious. Ethan felt the pieces align with a dull certainty. Caleb had taken Rex as a puppy, likely drawn to the breed's reputation more than its needs. Rex, even then, had been large-boned and attentive, a dog built for loyalty. And Ethan imagined the early months, Rex learning commands quickly, watching Caleb's moods, adjusting himself to avoid punishment. There were vet records, too, sporadic and incomplete, showing Rex had once been well fed. Then the visits stopped. The next report was animal control, unanswered. After that, nothing. When Rex sired the litter, the fragile balance collapsed. Puppies were noise, cost, responsibility, things Caleb had no tolerance for. The drugs on the table made sense now, not a plan born of cruelty alone, but of convenience. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had seen this pattern before in human cases, problems solved by erasure. Rex, however, had refused to let that happen. The rainstorm came up in the records as well, an overnight power outage, flooding reported across the district. Ethan pictured it clearly. Rex, soaked and shaking, muscles screaming as he pulled against a chain embedded deep into concrete, and the strength it would have taken to break free would have cost him skin and blood. He imagined the moment Rex chose pain over obedience. The instant instinct overrode fear. He could see Rex gripping Luna and Milo by their loose scruffs, one at a time, ignoring the thunder, ignoring the shouted curses behind him. Before running, Rex had done one more thing. He had gathered the drugs, all of them, into the canvas bag. Not to use them, to remove them, to make sure they could not be used again. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The bag was not just evidence, it was intent reversed. He stepped into the hallway where Rex lay. The dog lifted his head, amber eyes steady, searching Ethan's face for news. Ethan crouched, resting his forearms on his knees. "I know where you came from," he said quietly. Rex did not react outwardly, but his breathing shifted, slower, controlled. Some animals recognized truth not by words, but by tone. Across town, Caleb Moore stared at the empty space behind his unit where the chain once lay coiled. The concrete post was scarred, metal bent outward like a wound. Caleb's hands shook not with fear, but with rage sharpened by surprise. Rex was supposed to be gone. The puppies were supposed to be dealt with. He replayed the image of the bag in his mind, the same bag he had tossed aside once it became inconvenient. He realized then what Rex had taken with him. Not just the puppies, the proof. Caleb's mouth curled into a thin smile that never reached his eyes. He pulled on a jacket, movements sharp, purposeful. Problems, he believed, could still be fixed if confronted directly. Back at the clinic, Dr. Helen Ward emerged to speak with Ethan. She was in her late 50s, short and sturdy, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun that emphasized sharp cheekbones and a gaze worn smooth by decades of difficult outcomes. "They're alive," she said simply, "dehydrated, underweight, but strong." She paused, then added, "The male's lungs show mild irritation. Chemical exposure, most likely. They're lucky," Ethan nodded, absorbing the weight of that word, lucky. He looked down the hall toward Rex, who sat now, posture straight, as if standing guard over a threshold no one else could see. Ethan understood then why Rex had walked the streets instead of hiding. He hadn't been searching for safety. He had been searching for a witness. Across the city, Caleb started his car. Night settled over the city with deceptive calm, the kind that softened edges and hid intentions. A thin mist clung to the streets near the veterinary clinic, where Ethan Carter had arranged temporary shelter for Rex, keeping the location off official records for the moment. The building was old brick, 2 stories high, its back entrance lit by a single flickering lamp that cast long, uncertain shadows across the pavement. Rex sensed the shift before any sound reached human ears. His body, resting near the door, went rigid. Muscles tightened beneath his scarred coat, ears lifting, nostrils flaring as unfamiliar scent cut through the sterile smell of disinfectant. It was sharp, familiar, threaded with old fear and older anger. Caleb. Rex did not bark. He rose slowly, placing himself between the door and the darkness beyond, tail low, his stance wide and immovable. Ethan noticed the change instantly. Years on patrol had taught him to read posture as clearly as words. He stood from his chair, hand drifting toward the holstered weapon at his side, heart beginning to race despite his effort to remain outwardly calm. The clinic's interior was quiet. Luna and Milo slept under heat lamps in a back room, their small bodies wrapped in white towels. They were unaware that the past had found them again. Caleb Moore emerged from the shadows near the alley fence. Up close, he looked more worn than his file photos suggested. His tall frame slouched forward slightly, shoulders tense as if perpetually braced for impact. His beard was thicker now, unkempt, framing a mouth twisted into something between a smirk and a snarl. His eyes darted constantly, never resting, betraying a man who trusted no one and expected the same in return. His hands shook faintly, not from fear, but from suppressed fury. And to being discovered had not humbled him, it had sharpened him. "There you are," Caleb muttered, voice low and rough, his gaze locked onto Rex, not with regret, but with possession. "You should have stayed gone." Rex responded with a deep, resonant growl that seemed to vibrate through the concrete. It was not blind aggression. It was warning, measured, and final. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself slightly to Rex's side, weapon now visible but lowered. He knew escalation could be fatal in seconds. "Caleb Moore," Ethan said evenly, "you need to leave, now." Caleb laughed softly, a brittle sound that cracked under its own weight. "You don't get it, cop. That bag." His eyes flicked toward the canvas lying near the door. "That bag fixes a problem you just created." He lunged without further warning. The movement was sudden, clumsy with desperation, his hand reaching not for Ethan, but for the bag. Rex reacted faster than thought. He surged forward, but placing his body squarely between Caleb and the entrance, teeth bared now, eyes burning with absolute resolve. The impact sent the bag skidding across the concrete. It burst open as it slid, vials spilling free, glass shattering with sharp, unforgiving cracks. Liquid spread across the ground, catching the light in unnatural colors. "Stop!" Ethan shouted, raising his weapon, adrenaline roaring through his veins. His finger hovered, disciplined by training and haunted by memory. He did not fire. Rex did not retreat. Caleb froze, eyes wide now, staring at the broken evidence scattered at his feet. For the first time, something like fear crept into his expression. Not fear of harm, but of exposure. Sirens pierced the night, growing louder by the second. Sarah Lynn appeared at the far end of the alley, breathless, her coat pulled tight around her slim frame, phone still in hand. Her face was pale beneath the streetlight, the eyes wide with shock at the scene unfolding. She stopped short, instinctively understanding she did not belong in the center of it. Caleb backed away slowly, hands lifting too late, his mouth opening as if to argue, to explain, to rewrite the moment. But the truth lay shattered on the pavement, impossible to gather back together. Red and blue lights flooded the alley as backup arrived, officers spilling out with practiced efficiency. Caleb was restrained without ceremony, his protest dissolving into curses no one listened to. Rex stood over the broken bag, chest heaving, eyes still fixed on Caleb as he was led away. Only when the threat disappeared did his body begin to tremble, the delayed cost of restraint and memory. Ethan knelt beside him, one hand resting firmly on Rex's shoulder, grounding them both. "It's over," Ethan said quietly, though he knew Rex understood the words less than the tone. Rex exhaled slowly, the growl fading into silence. Morning arrived quietly, pale light sliding through the clinic windows and settling on surfaces scrubbed clean of the night before. The chaos had passed, leaving behind a stillness that felt earned rather than empty. Caleb Moore was in custody, the evidence cataloged and sealed, his anger reduced to paperwork and procedure. What remained here was smaller, softer, and infinitely more fragile. Luna and Milo slept beneath warming lamps in the recovery room, their breath steadier now, their tiny chests rising in rhythm for the first time since they had been born into danger. Their fur had been cleaned, revealing the true colors beneath the grime. Luna's lighter coat catching the light like straw, Milo's darker markings deepening to a rich charcoal. Dr. Helen Ward moved between them with practiced care, her short, a sturdy frame bent in a way that suggested reverence rather than routine. She had spent decades mending bodies that could not speak for themselves, and it showed in her touch firm when needed, gentle always. "They'll make it," she told Ethan, her voice low, certain. "Not without work, but they're fighters." She glanced toward the door. They get that from him. Rex lay just outside the room, stretched on the cool tile. Exhaustion had finally claimed him. His breathing was slow and even, the tension that had held his muscles like wire loosening at last. Up close, the cost of his vigilance was impossible to miss. The healed-over scars along his legs, the thinning fur where the chain had rubbed raw, the faint tremor in his flank that came and went with memory. He slept not in collapse, but in trust. as if the world had, at last, taken its watch. Ethan Carter stood nearby, and hands wrapped around a paper cup he had forgotten to drink from. He looked older in the morning light, the angles of his face sharper, the short beard catching silver he hadn't noticed before. Yet there was something else there now, too, a softness that had nothing to do with relief. He thought of the moment he had knelt on the sidewalk, of the bag placed carefully at his feet, of the choice to stop when stopping was inconvenient. In his line of work, outcomes rarely felt clean. This one did, not because it erased the harm, but because it honored the truth of it. Sarah Lynn arrived quietly, carrying a small box of supplies she had insisted on bringing: blankets, a toy shaped like a knotted rope, a stack of handwritten notes from neighbors who had heard the story by morning. She looked the same as before, slim, dark hair pulled back, pale skin flushed with emotion. But her movements were steadier now, a purpose replacing shock. She knelt a few feet from Rex, careful not to startle him, and set the box down. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, almost apologetically. Ethan shook his head. "This is perfect." The canvas bag sat on a counter nearby, emptied and clean, its seams still frayed, but no longer burdened. It looked smaller without its contents, ordinary even. Ethan picked it up, turning it over once in his hands. For days, it had been a vessel for fear and proof. Now it was just cloth. He set it aside and walked back to Rex, lowering himself until he was eye level with the dog. Rex stirred, eyes opening slowly. When he focused on Ethan, there was no question in his gaze, only a quiet assessment, as if he were taking stock of what remained to be done. Ethan placed a hand on Rex's head, fingers pressing gently into the thick fur between his ears. Rex did not flinch. He leaned into the touch, just enough to be unmistakable. You didn't carry death," Ethan said, his voice low, meant only for them. "You carried the truth." The words settled into the room, heavy and right. Rex exhaled, a long breath that seemed to empty something old from his chest. Later, paperwork would be filed. Statements would be taken. Caleb Moore would face consequences measured in months and years. Luna and Milo would grow, wobbling first, then running, learning the world from a place of safety rather than fear. Dr. Ward would oversee their care until they were strong enough to leave. Sarah would visit, then visit again. None of that needed to be decided yet. For now, the city moved on outside, unaware of the small victory that had unfolded within its noise. Thousands had passed Rex without seeing him. One had stopped. That had been enough. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or light. Sometimes they come quietly on 4 tired legs, carrying a truth too heavy to bear alone. Rex did not ask for food. He did not ask for shelter. He carried what he could no longer carry by himself, trusting that somewhere in the noise of the world, God would slow one heart down enough to see him. And that is how grace often works, not through crowds, not through power, but through one moment of kindness, one person who chooses to stop. In our daily lives, we pass by so much pain without meaning to. We tell ourselves we are busy. We assume someone else will help. But this story reminds us, sometimes we are the someone God is waiting to use. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you to look twice, to pause once more, to listen when something feels quietly wrong. A small act of compassion may be the miracle another soul has been praying for. Please share this story so it can reach someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Your voice matters here. And if you believe that kindness still has a place in this world, consider subscribing to the channel so these stories can continue to find their way home. May God bless you and protect you. May He guide your steps, soften your heart, and place you in the right moment when someone, somewhere is waiting to be seen. Amen.